All right, we are live. And this, I mean, for over a year now, that's really weird for me to say. For over a year now, I've been saying that every week, but I do love seeing everyone's name pop up. So as always, let us know where you're calling in from or logging in from and how you're doing. I see a lot of names that I've seen week after week after week, and we were literally just having a conversation about staying reconnected with everyone and how we are personable. We're a personable industry and a personable bunch. So I love seeing names. We have an amazing panel today, and I'm not just saying that because they're staring at me right now. We are, this year we wanted to focus on partnership. We wanted to focus on, strategically reopening and recovery and just kind of learn from each other. And who better to do that with than our NYC Company folks and our partners from New York City. So I am thrilled that John Marshall has pulled together an amazing panel of friends and colleagues so we can have this spectacular conversation. And I'm saying that knowing that you don't know what I know, because we did a run through, and our run throughs are generally like 15 or 20 minutes. And an hour later, I'm cutting everyone off and saying, we got to go, save this for the webinar. So it's going to be a fun conversation. And I'm really looking forward to just chatting with friends. And I hope that everyone will add their comments. And if you do have a question, please put it in the Q&A because it's easier for us to find. But again, we will do our best to find it wherever you put it in the chat box, and we will definitely get that question answered for you. I just saw Betsy Cooper from Tour Operator Land put her information up there. So if you haven't worked with Tour Operator Land, please reach out to Betsy. It's a great tool, and she's been my partner in crime for the past year, making sure that these conversations are new and fresh and keep us going week after week. So with that said, I think we've given everyone enough time to log in and get ready for this conversation that I already said was going to be spectacular. So no pressure, panel. Bring your A game. But as always, I want to start with you guys introducing yourself. You can do it better than me, and talk about kind of the company you represent, the role that you're in, which we all know has changed about 18 different times in the past year. So let us know how you're doing and what's going on. And John, since you were my partner in crime for this webinar, I'm going to make you go first.
Awesome, thanks, Sherry. It's great to be on the webinar. Thanks to everybody who's joining to hear this conversation. I'm John Marshall. I work for NYC Company, the DMO for New York City. And in the tourism development department. So I'm the director of tourism development, specifically focusing on domestic and Canadian visitation. So that's one of the domestic market is one of the first market we expect to return. So lots of busy times over at NYC Company for us right now. And yeah, I'll just leave it there for now and pass it over to David Filipiak.
I'm next. Hi, everybody. I'm a little nervous. I'm looking at the participants, all the names, and over 100, almost 100 people, and there's so many names. I miss you.
Isn't it fun to see all of these names?
Like, oh, so I'm David Filipiak. I'm the director of sales at Fotografiska, New York. It is a new photography museum that opened 90 days before New York City closed down on March 13th. Some of you might not even know I'm here or heard of this museum. Before this, I was at National Geographic Encounter in Times Square and helped open that attraction up. Fortunately, that did not make it through the pandemic. That's been closed. Also before that, I've been at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum, Broadway.com in New York City, and then for a few years out in California, the San Francisco Museum of Art and the San Diego Natural History Museum. And for all you tour operators out there, for 10 years, I got my start as a student tour operator. Shout out to Courtney and all the student tour operators. And I'll pass it on to Courtney then.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Betts. I work for EF Explore America, which is the student domestic division of EF Education First. At EF, I am the senior sourcing and contracting manager. So I actually look after New York City as a destination for the company, but also manage most of the other destinations, including Hawaii, California, Chicago, Boston, any other smaller destinations that maybe might have one or two groups that are interested in going. I kind of look after finding the hotels, the restaurants, the attractions with my team. I've been with EF for just about 10 years in different roles, and I am originally from Canada, but now work out of the Boston office. Even though I feel like I am a New Yorker, I am actually a resident of Massachusetts. So I'm very excited to be here to talk about New York because I do feel like it is my home away from home.
Love that. I think you're probably honorary, Courtney. I think everyone on this call would say you are. And Taylor, that leaves you, my friend.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Spoelstra, and I am actually the Senior Sales Manager for Artechouse. And just to give some reference, Artechouse is the nation's first innovative art destination dedicated to the intersection of art, science, and technology. I actually handle predominantly all third-party sales and revenue management for the company. I actually joined Artechouse in February of 2020. So it was an interesting time. I did not know what was to come. But I have been in this industry for about a decade now, working at places like Merlin Entertainment, so Madame Tussauds, New York City, New York Cruise Lines. And I started actually on the restaurant end of the sales, of group sales. So very nice to be on this call, and thank you for inviting me.
I love it. Thank you guys so much for being here. When we started talking about what we were going to focus on this year, knowing we wanted to do recovery and partnership, I immediately reached out to John because NYC Company they've done so many cool programs on working across the aisle, working non-traditionally, working on getting that city back opening and marketing and reaching out and creating these programs. And it has taken us 4 months, John, right? But we were trying to find a day that worked, and we kept pushing it and finding new days. And it's taken us 4 months to get here, but we got here. So I think I'm gonna start with you, John. And I know questions will start coming in. And Courtney, just FYI, they're going to ask you to repeat what markets you work, and everyone on the call, I'm going to get Courtney to write them down for me, and we will send them out to everyone because that's going to be a question. But what, this is a crazy question when I ask it, but we know it's been a challenging time. But what's been the most challenging thing you guys have really faced in New York? And I'll make it easy for you. Last year was horrible. In reopening, kind of challenging, strategically thinking, how do you wrap your head around that? How have you done that this year?
Yeah, it's difficult. I would say, to just answer the question plainly, the hardest thing is that there are so many hard things. So I think prioritizing, right, what's the most important. As a company who manages a destination, we have so many different constituencies, if you will. We have the locals that we have to represent, right? We have the city itself, the brand of the city, and then we have our members like David and Taylor, and then the tour operators, the travel advisors, that entire community that we also owe something to. So I think making sure that we have our priorities straight and getting the right tools in the hands of the right audiences has really been, and making sure doing that with some limited staffing and some limited funds, kind of in the space that we are all in right now, where we're all, holding multiple hats, whether that be scheduling webinars or building education platforms or getting tools for operators, attending trade shows, just doing multiple things in a way that we haven't had to do before, in a way that we're very stretched in. I'd say that's the most challenging part.
I can chime in.
Understand that, and David, I'm gonna tackle all this question with all of you. So David, jump in.
For the things that come to mind for me is not only is Fotografiska new, so we're building, even if there wasn't COVID, there was just the initial challenges of yet another startup of trying to get the word out there in our industry. But I'd say right now, the most challenging is the fluidity of everything. It is impossible. I know what needs to be done, but I don't know what timeline that is. And it could change, it changes every day I wake up, and something else could change. So for instance, this talk of a potential fourth wave could change what we think is our time frame, and then we're skidding back a few steps. So that's probably one of the hardest thing, is the fluidity. And it was funny, in 2020, we're coming up on 2021 budgeting and projections, and so much of what we do in our industry is future projections is based off of past performance, and that's out the window. So trying to get any sense of projections or budgeting and what we can do is impossible. So I rely a lot on NYC Company's data and projections to just manage our executives' expectations of what tourism could be and should be for the next year, 2 years, 3 years. And so that's always been a challenge too, is continually telling them tourism is strong. It's going to be a huge driver. You just have to have faith, and we need to build that foundation now and rebuild it because it will be coming back. It just has to.
Absolutely. Resilient and will come back. What's forecasting? I mean, come on, that just doesn't exist anymore. Courtney, from an operator standpoint, especially from the student side, clearly didn't have a lot of tours going out last year. Have you had any go out this year yet?
So not from our student division. So EF has a bunch of different products centered around different age groups. So we have college products and we have adults, and those more, FIT kind of groups have been going out slowly to, we had a couple
That would be
groups.
my computer. I apologize
No,
for that. I
that's
tell
fine.
everyone, I'm like, no, go ahead and mute. And my computer didn't this time. So I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so we've had very, very little volume on the ground in some more like a national parks kind of setting, very much outdoors. We are, been very cautious. Safety is always our main priority in all aspects of EF. And so with the unknowns of how to actually protect people against COVID-19, even with all of the amazing things that people are putting into place at hotels and restaurants and attractions, that still isn't a guarantee. And that can be challenging for an operator to give, a client it's okay, you can go. So that's been a struggle for sure with that. But I think like the hardest part, so from the student operator perspective, of course, kids haven't really been in school. So in general, it can be challenging in a good year to know all of the different rules and regulations that each state and school board within those states wants to follow. And that's always been a main priority of our tour consultants who are working with the teachers, to our education teams working with the school boards to make sure we're following that. And so now when those resources are a little unclear and some states are in school and some states are not in school, it just makes it an extra challenge. So I think the majority of our groups have been opting to stay off the road, but that's mostly because some of our main destinations are big cities like New York, which is a little bit harder to, do some things that maybe they'd like to see on a trip. If they're not open, they don't necessarily need to go. So, that's been challenging for sure, to try and manage expectations and get people still excited and focused on traveling. But we have groups that are hoping to go anytime. So they're just kind of holding on, and we're just waiting with them day by day for like as long as we possibly can to make sure it works. And that's just kind of how it's been since we had to pull them off the road last March. We have some dedicated customers who are just crossing their fingers to be able to travel.
Yeah, and I think that kind of answers the question. And Taylor, I'm going to have you jump in on this question as well. Greg Dotson, who I haven't seen him forever other than on LinkedIn posts, and I miss you, my friend, asks a great question on how hard it is to sell New York right now, domestically or internationally. I know he loves Broadway, so he specifically threw out there without Broadway, but so many unknowns. But I mean, to your point, Courtney, you have groups that are interested and they're just waiting, which is awesome to hear. And Taylor, you've been open recently. You've done a lot of different changes to where you can be open. So how has it been, one, for you challenging, and two, when you're talking about sales, how are you focusing on that right now?
Yeah, so Artechouse is a very evergreen institution, and we change out our installations every few months. And with that, there's tremendous local appeal. So because we have been very reliant on local and regional visitation, we have luckily done very well since reopening. And some of that may be in due part. We are a smaller venue in terms of the capacity we accommodate. Now, we never ran at full capacity because we are an immersive institution. Even pre-COVID, we wanted people to be able to immerse themselves and enjoy the space without overcrowding. So in that sense, the transition into this time, I know that some of my partners may have felt that hit a bit harder. So I am very thankful for that. I'd say one of the challenges are, keeping the status of both industry partners, both on the supplier and buyer side. There are plenty. I maintain contact with a lot, luckily, and Courtenay is a personal friend, so that was very easy to. It was very easy to keep in touch. We would have kept in touch regardless. But there is a level of sensitivity on my end. I don't know what the status is for some of the partners I normally work with scattered throughout the country. I guess that would be a struggle at least on the group sales end of it, that it's been a bit complicated, and I imagine it's been that for most of us.
I agree with Taylor. Our industry, we're just naturally optimistic, upbeat people. And so but we're also quite empathetic at times, and we want to be sensitive of certainly not contact somebody and just act like nothing else, not going on, hey, what can we do to help you? And it's been a sensitive thing. Is like, is now the time to reach out, or should I just wait and until we know what the future holds?
Right.
And I do
want people to reach out right now. I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
No, I did want to jump in there really quickly because it's no surprise that we made it exactly 2 questions in before somebody asked about Broadway, right? It's something that a lot of people are really curious about, and no surprise that, as you said, that Greg asked the question. Broadway sales have been suspended through the end of May, and we know that doesn't mean that Broadway shows will return in June. So we are expecting a return to Broadway this year. Our mayor, Bill de Blasio, did come out very recently and said he's setting September as a target date. Remains to be seen whether that can be done, but we certainly know we're putting all of our energies behind that where we can. Broadway is a super important part of New York City, and we really can't wait for it to get back. I mean, I know personally I can't wait for it to get back, but we know that there are some visitors that come to New York City for Broadway, right? That's kind of the hook that lures them to the city. But I think right now we're really trying to focus on and let people know that the diverse group of experiences that you can have in New York City, knowing that people want wide open spaces and to do kind of new things. We're really trying to get the word out that, maybe a surprise to some, Manhattan's getting its first public beach this year, right, on Gansevoort Peninsula, so right by the Whitney Museum of American Art. So that's one thing. We want people to know that they can do some serious hiking out in Staten Island and go jet skiing, in the Rockaways, and do some whale watching like people did last year, right? So we're investing in our public parks, a lot of expansion there. The High Line will be getting an expansion soon. So you can go zip lining on Governor's Island, do some glamping in some fabulous tents, right? So there's a really rich group of experiences that you can experience in New York, and it's not just Broadway. And then just to quickly touch on what Greg said about the unknowns in the month ahead, I think our strategy really is to make sure that we're ready for when it's time to go, right? To have everything set in stone and have the plans ready. So whether that means May or June or August, as soon as we get the word, we can kind of hit the ground running, following the science and making sure that we can welcome people back when it's safe.
Perfect. And I'll throw in there from a Broadway perspective. Jared would have never done this unless we mentioned it. And he's like, hey, you mentioned Broadway, so here's my information. Any specific questions, I am sure he would love to answer that. And he put his stuff in the chat box there. Or you can reach out to me and I'll be happy to share it with you. So, you know, let's pivot, because that was one of my key buzzwords that I hated last year, but I'm going to use it this year just because. I even used new normal, which I also hate, but I used that in an email to everyone before. Let's talk about partnership. Let's talk about, you know, I think my first question is, do you view partnerships differently now because of last year? Or how you would approach them? We all love each other. New York, very tight-knit brunch, that I know. And you guys all have always worked very, very well together. But there was always that view of competition, even when you were working well together. So are you viewing how you look at a partnership differently now versus 2019?
I'll jump in if to answer, if that works. Yeah, I find that especially in New York City, as you were saying, we are a really tight brood. And I found in my experience that we don't really treat our competitors like competitors, but colleagues in this big New York boat. And especially during this time, we're all working to build back New York City or just build back in general. And I find New York City does that as a collective. In fact, all of the people on this call have been integral, you know, in helping me navigate this new world. I had been furloughed for about 5 months during the closures, you know, during the pandemic. And the minute I was brought back, I spoke to John, Courtenay, and Dave, and many other partners who are probably on this call. And the willingness to offer assistance and guidance and collaboration is part of why I love this industry so much, especially my New York City family. So yeah, I mean, that's my perspective on it. I've never ever looked, even when I was on restaurants, you know, I think I see Joey Del Bono on this call, and I started at Planet Hollywood and he was at the Hard Rock, you know, and those were a few blocks away, generally competing for the same business. But we developed a great friendship, and that benefited us both personally and professionally.
I love that. So I think the answer is you like them even more, right? I mean,
yeah, I think we are
even more important.
Yeah, I think we're even more dependent on each other now more than ever, and you know, and it's a great group to be in that type of situation with, because I have not spoken to anybody in this industry whose first, you know, isn't like, how can I help, or how are you doing, or what can we do, or is there a way we can make this work, or maybe we can partner this way, even though we weren't able to do that before. And the willingness, you know, has been, I think, quite beautiful in a really, really hard time.
I agree. New York City has always been special or unique about how our colleagues as well as competitors, and Taylor said it perfectly. I think that stems back from many, many years ago. I'm thinking of the professional generations before me that instilled that, and it's only grown. The Mary Farrells, I see Lucille is on here. That generation, and even before that, was, we are in this together. We're going to make New York City rise. If anything, I think the partner, that concept in New York City has only intensified, and it continues. It's so wonderful to see new generations of tourism and professionals in New York City continue that forward, and how we're still very collegial and very competitive, but also collegial. But if anything, Sherry, I would say, I feel like I want to expand that beyond New York City. I'm like, how do I help the tourism industry rebound? Not just New York City, but we're all in this now. It's going to be a new post-COVID world, and we had such a strong tourism industry domestically and internationally. How do we make sure we all help and support each other? And I don't know if I have the answer yet. I know how I'm going to partner with people in New York City and how we can help, but how can I help people outside of New York City, or the tour operators or others, to help make sure tourism rebounds? If you have any suggestions, I'm all for it.
Right. And I mean, I think that's what these calls are all about, is the collaboration, or at least let's spark some ideas about collaboration and continue the conversation even offline for months to come. But David, you mentioned that you know how you're going to partner in New York City. You want to share some of that with us? I know that's totally putting you on the spot. So
Yeah.
anybody else can jump in if he's partnering with them already.
Sadly, it's not like I have here's my plan of, we're a new museum. We're trying to do things differently. So really, I love that the people at Fotografiska are like, you tell us how do we want to break the rules or the things that have been done in the past. So anything's open, and I love that we have that freedom to do it. And there are many others in New York City that are like that. I know Taylor and I have already been like, is there some synergy here? Two immersive art experiences that are different, but potentially similar, that not see us as competitors, but how do we help people just get back to cultural attractions? That will be the same with many other cultural attractions or restaurants. I know some hotels around the Flatiron District have reached out to me, and I'm like, yes, what the specific tactics yet, still figuring out, but I think we're all coming from an attitude of yes.
I think everything is a work in progress, right? And I think we'll change it about 19 times before we find the secret sauce that works. But John, I know NYC has so many partners, and you guys work with them so well. Have there been partnerships just in getting the word out? And Dave, you mentioned, is it time to sell? Do we still want to not sell? Is it inspiration? Is it selling? Kind of what's the right time? What are you guys doing right now, partnership wise or selling wise, to get that word out?
Yeah, I want to say first, some of the first partnerships we had once the pandemic reality kind of came, right, is we one of the first partnerships was with the hotel, with the hospital community, the FDNY, and the hotels, over 100 of our member hotels, to come together and build a booking platform to help the first responders and the people who were really helping out during the height of the pandemic. As everybody knows, New York City was very hard hit in that initial wave. So being able to help the people who were helping us, right, that was super important. We also, from the very onset, formed the Coalition for New York City Hospitality and Tourism Recovery, which included luminaries like Emily Rafferty and Lin-Manuel Miranda, Tim Zagat, and Danny Meyer, among others, to really make sure that we were keeping the full scope of hospitality and tourism together, in mind as we were going to move forward. And so now, as we go together a little bit more tactically, we try to, kind of like, Taylor and David have mentioned, we try to keep our members as informed as possible. So we've done a study on the sentiment of the Northeast corridor of our drive market and the consumer sentiment there. We've now moving into our third phase of the travel trade sentiment survey that we've done, and feeding that out to our members. We send out a monthly tourism barometer to make sure that people know what flights into New York City looks like, what hotel booking trends look like, as we know that those are some of the indicators that are going to show us when people are returning to the city. So it's really keeping our members educated, doing our NYC Talk series, which is a member exclusive webinar content that we do to make sure that they have the best tools at their fingertips to make the best decisions for their companies. And just to kind of go back, I didn't really get a chance to give in feedback on it, but I mean, we are so lucky as a DMO to have so many partners that do believe in working together, that do believe in the strength, and our strength together being way stronger than by ourselves. And we've started doing virtual sales missions to reconnect with the buyers, to talking about, is it the right time? I think it is. I think operators by and large are very happy to hear from us. We just wrapped up our first virtual sales mission last week. We focused on domestic operators. Courtenay was actually attended. We did a virtual office visit with EF Explore America and worked with a couple of other partners there. And the members and the clients alike were just so happy to be able to talk to each other, right? To talk business and to be able to have a sense of normalcy. It's something that we haven't had in the last year. And to be able to do that with a group of members that really understood that coming together and joining that conversation is just so much more rich for everyone.
I love that. And Courtenay, I'm going to pick on you for a minute. We had this conversation a couple days ago, but in the last year, you've had time to reevaluate programs and activities and destinations, and really look at everything that as a company you were offering clients. So I'm assuming that these types of things, virtual sales missions, office visits, are huge for you right now, and even until last year.
Yeah, for sure. So, we've been privileged enough to be able to keep most of our staff. So we, had our product development team staffed, ready to go. We had our sourcing team ready. So we've been able to plan and think forward during this, year off, so to speak. And at the beginning of the year, we thought it was going to be dead and we'd have all these projects that we could get done. And then that didn't turn out to be the case. There was a lot of other things that we need to be focusing on. But, our product development team and our education team, they have been very busy in terms of reevaluating tours from the past. Like we just met today about them looking at some of our tours that maybe weren't as successful from a customer evaluation perspective in 2016, 17, and 18, and how we can revitalize those itineraries for 23, 24, 25, and just make sure that we are listening to people who traveled a long time ago, as well as the current customers and what they're asking for. So really taking the time to dive in and make sure that our itineraries are up to date with what students of this generation are looking for, and identifying what they're going to want to be looking for in a couple of years, which is challenging. But that is why it's always like, I always am getting emails from different attractions to just let me know that they're out there in case it comes up. And I've always said that, a partnership doesn't necessarily mean that we are working together currently on something. A partnership is being colleagues in this industry and knowing what that we can do together when that moment arises. Like at this time, I've worked with Taylor and David in many different capacities in their past attractions, but because their attractions are so new to New York, we haven't been sending groups to them yet. So in theory, we are not current partners from a supplier operator standpoint, but I still talk to them about things we could do in the future, or their advice on how we could, partner that activity at their attraction with something else that's on that itinerary. And so having the New York team as a whole, knowing what's out there, has been really great. And we saw that last week in the sales mission, that every single person that John brought to the virtual office was listening to each other and was able to say in their own presentation, oh, that's awesome. If you're going to go to Hudson Yard, you can just walk down the High Line and come to the Whitney. Or, if you're going to go to the Whitney, you can also go to the MoMA and compare and contrast the different styles of art. And everyone was talking about how they can add something to that experience, which I just think is so great and speaks well to how the city is, ready to get together to make it happen, as long as they're allowed to.
It's like, well, and it's funny that you say allowed to, and so Dave and Taylor and John, I want you to jump in on this. One of the questions is, when do you anticipate capacity restrictions will ease for cultural attractions? It's happening for other industries, not necessarily tourism. We want it all to be safe, but specifically the question is, how do we support this particular industry? How do we get those capacity issues lifted? I mean, I think it's safety, right? But
John, I think the mayor just announced, or the governor did just recently, a day or two ago, museums, right now we're at 25% capacity for museums, but that's being questioned because research is now starting to come out that indoor museums is a relatively safe indoor activity.
The safest indoor activity.
The safest. So I believe I happen to also be on the Tourism Advisory Council recently for the state of New York, tourism, and Assemblyman Danny O'Donnell was just kind of pressing that concept of, when can we start? Museums in New York City are so much a pillar of what New York City is. At what point can we safely expand that capacity? And I think there's starting to be scientific data, and the interest to expand that capacity. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we see that happening much sooner than later.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, sorry, John, but that definitely has been the biggest hurdle for us from a student perspective, a student group perspective, because, you know, there's so many things that they need to check off, because all of our itineraries are educational in some way. So the educators have chosen the itineraries because it complements something that's happening in their classrooms. And so, yes, there are some attractions that are open in New York that are willing to accept groups, student groups, not just like, you know, a family, a real group. I keep having to remind people in my internal company what the difference is between, you know, like a small group and our groups. But, you know, that's a hard piece. So like right now they could come to the city and do some of the, you know, cool, fun, like observation deck kind of attractions, but the educators aren't able to check off some of those true curriculum pieces at this time. And it's been hard to explain to some of our customers that yes, these museums are open, they're just not open for you, and trying to explain the reasons why. And you know, I've had so many conversations over the last year with all the cultural institutions to try and provide our assistance to help them think through those reopening plans. And a few of them have utilized that. And we've been talking through what it could look like. But I understand that the hesitancy, because when you think of a group, you think of 50 people walking together through a space at the same time. And how can we reset those expectations for our customers in a group setting to act like these small families or less, to be able to go into the museum and not panic anybody, because we wouldn't want other visitors, individual visitors, feeling like a museum was breaking any rules in any way just because we see a gaggle of kids all hanging out in the same space. So I know that it's been very challenging, but if we can get that sorted out, that's a huge hurdle to try and bring back travel to any major city, but definitely New York. Right.
I think you'll find also in New York City, it's going to be that tension of we want to accommodate and we also need to be on the safer side of cautious, especially in New York City. I feel like universally, all the attractions, museums and things to do and we don't want to mess this up. You know, if New York slides back and we're being a little unsafe, it will have future, you know, ripple effect. And so none of us is feeling like we you know, when you say we're open, but not open to you, large group of 200, it's not because we're trying to be difficult. We just don't want to screw it up. And I think everybody here is trying to be as safe and cautious and data driven versus what we emotionally want to do to bring everything back.
Yeah, I would just jump in and say, you know, we have 3 locations, you know, one in New York City, DC, Miami. We've been, as I've mentioned earlier in the conversation, we've been able to safely operate our 3 locations because we've always operated at lower capacity limits to ensure, you know, an intimate experience. Additionally, our installations, and I'm sure, you know, many museums can relate to this, we have integrated like touchless interactive art, you know, we are, and I'm sure we all are, going above and beyond to ensure a safe experience, including mandatory mask policy, which is, you know, of course, a city policy, but, you know, enforce social distancing. We do temperature checks at check-in, more frequent cleanings. So we've always operated very safely. It's just extra now, you know, where.
So, but Lori's question, she asked a second one to that, which is interesting, is are we seeing an extreme variation of group capacities from attraction to attraction? I'm not that familiar with that. John might know, but I know I would, you know, if somebody called me and, you know, we're a smaller museum, be like, we can't accommodate 100 people, but I can certainly find out from another museum because, again, we're all in this together. But John, or Courtney, have you seen a lot of variations in New York City about group size limitations?
I think Courtney's probably the best person to answer this question, right? Because the question is kind of more pressing for her than the rest of us on this call. She really needs that information ASAP. But I can say, I don't want to say that there's a lot of variation, right? I would say most places are not accepting groups right now. And the exception is a handful, you know, of attractions that are basically more inherently safe from an open air perspective, that are more comfortable taking groups at this time. Just to go back to the first part of the question, there's no way to anticipate what's going to happen. This is really a state mandate, so it's whenever they can follow this, when they see the science will allow. But I think we can be encouraged by the domestic quarantine mandatory being lifted today. And us being able to allow domestic travelers to see people, sporting venues being allowed to open at a 10% capacity, seeing the restaurant capacity go from 25% to 50% for indoor dining in the course of just over a month, seeing our event venue capacities continue to increase. So, we might not have hit all the specific boxes yet. We might not have let everything open and increase capacity for everything, but we're getting there. And I think we're getting there safely. And as we're doing a great job of getting vaccine rollouts, the fact that, we have large venue vaccination sites in all 5 of our boroughs that you can get vaccinated on a 24-hour basis in New York City. I think we're focusing on that right now, making sure that it's very safe. New York City is a very dense city, and is I don't want to say unique that way, but there aren't a lot of cities that are like us in the way that people interact, the way that people pass each other. So what works for other cities doesn't necessarily work for us. And we've seen the darkest days. We were impacted in a really severe way, and we don't want that to happen again.
Yeah, just to jump off that exact what John just said about how some things don't necessarily work in New York, might work other places. That's an internal struggle that we always have, like on our sourcing team, is we'll try and create a plan, a strategy, but it won't work the same way for New York as it does for DC. And so my colleague Natalia is always having to remind us, like, DC is a different monster than New York. And so the two of us have to figure out ways to make certain things work with the uniqueness of our destinations. And I think that that's always important to remember, that just because one thing works somewhere doesn't mean it can work somewhere else, but the ideas behind those things can help us inform and make decisions how to make something work. Because the idea is probably really great, but how do you make that happen? But from the capacity standpoint, yeah, I don't see it being drastically different. Like, the cultural institutions are all following the same general rules. Right now, the observation decks, because you're never in a group, those are spaces that are have been more than happy to take a group of my students should they be in the city. But I have noticed that some people interpret the rules in different ways. And so that's been really interesting in all of my conversations with different attractions, that because the guidance isn't necessarily super clear. And I think all of us on this call, no matter what state we're in, can agree that it's been a little challenging to truly figure out what your attraction or your restaurant or your kids on tour fall into. And so that's just been interesting to have those conversations and take note of how we should be thinking through things slightly differently and preparing for all possible options for a reopening.
And more than likely, I would bet that you need to be thinking that way into 2022, at least from a company standpoint, right? You're thinking that way into tours for next season as well.
Yeah, we every day we're rejigging our matrix of how can this tour happen? How could this tour happen? How could this tour happen? And so we are totally understanding that that's probably going to happen in 22 as well. We're all on the same page that based on what we're seeing with the vaccine data, and that we should be in a better position in 2022. But people were saying that, for 2021. So we're being extra cautious just to make sure that anything that we've identified right now as being a really great alternative, should something be closed or something, have a max capacity, since we know time ticketing is going to be here to stay. Most attractions that just implemented it, we're having to make sure that we have more options to give to our customers should we not be able to get the first choice on the itinerary for a museum.
So Federico is asking a question, really, and it goes into what you were just talking about, John. I was going to bring up that the domestic quarantine ended today, so I'm glad you did. He wants to know how you guys feel about Yankee Stadium opening, and games, being played to, and the public can join in. Federico's from Argentina, by the way, and an operator there that I'm sure is dying to get groups back to New York.
Well, Federico, as you may be able to see behind me, I'm in the Bronx right now. This picture is 192nd in Grand Concourse, but I do actually live in the Bronx. I'm from here, and I'm a huge Yankees fan. So I'm excited to see the Yankees get back with fans. We've had the Knicks and the Nets, our basketball teams in New York City, have been performing in front of crowds for a couple months now. And they've done so safely, and they've been able to keep that safe. And I think that the baseball teams will be able to do that as well. So we're really looking forward to the Yankees and the Mets having a really good season, and believing that our partners in the NBA, our partners in Major League Baseball, are going to do everything possible to keep fans safe, to make sure that they're masking and being distanced and taking temperatures. And as soon as they do see an outbreak, they take quick action. Right? We've seen NBA players be pulled from lineups and have to miss several games. They're protecting the audience and the people, their players, before they're putting it before their product. And I think that's a really good thing to see right now. So I have a lot of confidence in what they're going to be able to do.
Would you guys generally agree, in New York City, there seems to be an overwhelming appreciation and understanding that we mask up, we stay distant, versus maybe some other places of the country, that New York we're used to being in this together when there are difficult times. I think there's always outliers, but I think the overwhelming majority in New York City, you see everybody doing what needs to be done. So if you're at a baseball stadium, that doesn't mean you're going to take the mask off and go shoulder to shoulder with everybody, all the other people there.
Yeah, Dave, I entirely agree with you. I remember upon reopening, I was wondering what the mask mandate would be for incoming guests, and part of the concern is our visitor experience hosts. We don't want them to deal with any sort of, conflict that puts them whether in emotional or physical danger, whatever it may be. But I have to say, especially at our New York City location, we haven't really encountered much of that at all, and that was wonderful and refreshing to hear, from our operations team, because that was a genuine concern for me. So I agree with you. In New York City, I think we've all, for the most part, have all banded together in this effort.
The same at our museum. We were concerned when we reopened in August what we might encounter, because we've all seen the YouTube videos and it really isn't there. So as tourism starts coming back, we're going to expect the same behavior from, I think, the visitors coming to New York as well.
Yeah, when everything happened, the pandemic, and things started to reopen last summer, with a lot of the attractions that opened, attractions and museums, and luckily they've been able to stay open largely since August last year. One of the first things we did was start the Stay Well NYC pledge, which is really putting together some basic protocols like masking and like social distancing to keep people safe. And like Taylor mentioned, not only our visitors, but the staff. Like, that's a super important part for us, that people who have to be on the front lines or are choosing to be on the front lines to work at our attractions are also being kept safe. And that's a very important thing. And I'm happy to say that by the time we created the Stay Well NYC pledge, countless of our members had already put restrictions into place, had already put very similar, kind of those guidelines and mandates into place. And so it was a very easy and seamless thing for us to do. And we've had, near 100% buy-in from all of our members. It's been really uplifting to see that everybody does believe in that and continues to abide by it.
I think that's great. And, as we talk about, things that were able to open last year and stay open, groups weren't really coming in. The trade wasn't really bringing in those individuals. So, from a marketing standpoint, were you able to shift direction locally and into local consumers to get individuals into your area? I mean, strategically, talk about being strategic. We're talking about tactics for the trade, and all of a sudden something that you don't normally do is just rotated completely internally.
I want to jump in. Fred Dixon started using language from the very beginning. I'm sure every destination is doing this, but he kept using the word concentric circles. That's our path to recovery for the city. And frankly, I think every attraction museum is thinking similarly. Concentric, like for instance, when we first opened in August, I'm supposed to be in charge of tourism. There are no tourists coming, but I used the phrase local tourists. There's plenty of people locally in our neighborhood that are going to start acting as tourists to rediscover the city. That's what NYC Company did right from the get-go, is change their advertising and marketing internally, and all of a sudden they're advertising to the New Yorkers to rediscover their city. And then they're going to move out to the region, to the tri-state, and then domestically and internationally. So I think right from the beginning, everybody has shifted their strategy to this concept of concentric circles. Timeline is still fluid of when those circles will expand, but I think that's the reality.
Right.
And that's exactly right, David. You know, we launched the campaign in the summer, All in NYC, which really was meant to serve as a rallying cry for New Yorkers, by New Yorkers, to let them know that, you know, not only were we there for them, but there were ways for them to also support their city. And you know, it's long been a hashtag we use, to see your city. And realizing that the locals were the people that could come and visit attractions right now, attractions and museums and other establishments, restaurants. And so we wanted to double down on that and also give access to people, easy ways that they could reach out to the audience. So we launched our neighborhood getaways, which were offers that our members and other businesses could put on our platform and give the locals one website to go to and kind of see, you know, hotels they could stay at, attractions they could go to, tours they could use. You know, we also put together staycation itineraries based on borough and neighborhood that people could use to really get out in their own backyard and explore in a way that they really hadn't had the chance to before, or maybe didn't know how to do before. They maybe, because it is so often that we don't even realize the things that are in our own backyards in New York City. So yeah, it was super important from the beginning that we focus on the locals, and the locals have really helped uplift the city from that perspective. We launched Restaurant Week to Go this year for the first time we've ever did it on a to go basis, focusing really on delivery, and also for the first time ever, it was a no fee program. So we were actually able to reach over 800 restaurants in the city, which was smashing the old record that we had previously. And the way we were able to do that was to really go out into the specific neighborhoods in our boroughs and allow people in those neighborhoods to support their local businesses. And we did hear feedback that it really made a difference for some of those businesses to get some of those orders through. And I think that's a lesson for us, and I think for any other DMO and for any attraction in any city, is don't forget about the locals, because they're the ones that are here for us all the time, year round. We can't forget who our true customer is, right? From that perspective, who does a DMO really serve? And it is the locals, right? And maybe I say that selfishly as a native New Yorker, but I do truly believe it.
Strategically, looking at since there are tour operators on here, and I see like Gina Fitzpatrick from Tickets on here and all that. For me, I was started to see our ticketing partners as also helping us to expand our exposure to the local audience or regional audience. We can't, especially in this time, spend a lot of money on advertising that there's a new museum, but I am certainly relying on my ticketing partners to help reach out to the local and regional audience.
And I was going to bring that up. I know we're wrapping up too. We have 7 minutes left. I knew this was going to happen with this group. But when we talk about partnership, we've talked about, not only the hotel and the restaurant and the DMO working together with the operator, but it is that it's your operator becoming that partner of not just bringing you business, but helping you promote your business. It is the association, and Dave, I think you mentioned this on our call earlier. It's the ABAs and the CITAs and the NTAs and the IITAs of the world, and I hope I didn't forget any of the A's, all the alphabet associations, US Travel, that are working with you to help who's still there, who's your contact. I think that partnership is so much more than the traditional that we thought about in 2019.
Exactly.
There's ways to tap into it.
As Courtney said, just because you might not be doing direct sales right now, the partnership still needs to maintain there. So maintaining as much as you can with some of these organizations and being active is just a way of saying we're still here, and when you're ready for us, we're here, and here's who you contact. I'm sorry, go John.
No, I was going to say, you mentioned all those companies, and I think they've all done all those associations, and I think they've done a super great job of staying connected and in some cases offering reduced membership fees to make sure that people could stay in contact, and making sure that, even if you weren't a member anymore, that, you could still get on a mailing list and you could still be part of the community. And I think, I want to give special credit to USTA and ABA and some others who have been fighting for all of us down in Washington, D.C., whether it be, getting, DMOs included in some PPP protection, or, fighting for the motor coach industry and making sure that we were in a lot of the bills that have been passed. I think that has made a huge difference, right, to how a lot of us are able to recover. And we're all indebted to them, really, for the foreseeable future for what they were able to do for us.
Absolutely. So I'm going to do some rapid fire questions because we have 3 questions that have come in and I want to get to them before our time is done. So one of them is for Lisa. John, this is for you. Some DMOs, like Nashville has done this, have started adapting the WHO standard for COVID safety within the city as well. And they were wondering if NYC has been doing that. Has that been built into your plans to open safely, as you mentioned earlier, to attract international tourists? I know that's putting you on the spot because you do domestic, but
Yeah, I think we all do everything right now, so that's totally fine. From the very beginning, and I don't want to say this wasn't with an international tourist in mind. Maybe long term it was to some extent, but we knew the best thing to do was to follow the science, right? So using respected organizations like the WHO, the CDC, our state scientists, our local city scientists, and the recommendations that we were giving has long been a part of our plan. Again, I wouldn't say that was specific with the international tourist in mind and getting them to us, but more so making sure that we were taking care of everybody who was visiting us in a safe way.
Perfect. And Courtney, this one is for you from Dawn. Assuming sites open in the fall, this is basically what you're hearing from your groups. Do you have anybody that's planning to travel in 2021? And are you hearing any special requirements from them that they're asking for?
So yeah, we do have a good amount of groups that are still planning to travel in 2021. Those are the ones that are sticking with us and are just hoping that they can go. We haven't seen like an uptick of sales requests for the fall, but that's really just because we're a student tour operator and that March through June is really when schools can make it make sense for the most part. So our fall volume isn't necessarily our top season, but that could change as we're seeing day by day things are changing. As a generalization, I would say that the schools we're working with are just depending on us to make the right decision. So we're not getting specific safety requests from them. So we as an organization are just working on trying to figure out with our partners, like what is a reasonable expectation for them. I do know that there has been a trend where hotels have been hiring a COVID safety director who is making decisions on the property to make sure that they can handle groups in different ways than, individual guests. So, and I know that some restaurants, larger chains have done those kind of things. So I do think that once we actually have groups on the road in the big destinations, we might have a better idea of what makes sense to ask for versus what you're already doing yourself as a site. But I would encourage, if you have been putting these plans in place as any type of site, sending those to the tour operators so that we can have those on file, so that if we do get specific requests about how this specific museum or how this hotel is doing it, then we have that documentation directly from you that we can pass in a package or something to those groups, or at least have our sales team be able to reference them to speak to that when they're getting that group ready to depart. So, I'm sure we will have specific requests. Those just change daily. So I don't have any specific examples right now, but our main line is that we are following the rules and regulations of the state that the group is traveling to. And so, we will trust that you are following those rules if you're open, and hope that we can make sure we're on the same page there.
Love that. So generally, this is when I ask all of our panelists for words of encouragement or wisdom moving into 2021. But Teresa, a receptive that's down here in Florida, and I'm sure you guys know her, has a great question. So I'm going to end with this and let this be your words of encouragement and wisdom for us. She is curious that She wants to ensure that her clients still see NYC as a magical city. It's no secret that the news hasn't been great over the last year. So how can she assure all of her clients that it's still a magical place to be?
I'd like to start.
My New Yorker, an honorary New Yorker.
Question posted for a while, and I want to thank you for making sure we answer that, because I didn't want to get glossed over. I get personally hot under the collar with this kind of thing. Just a couple of weeks ago, my dad, small town Midwest, when I told him I'm starting to go back into the museum a couple of times, he's, oh, you better watch your back. I'm, what are you talking about? Oh, on the news, blah, blah, blah. I get really heated when I hear that, because it's not a fair representation of our city. Our city is magical. It is today. It will be tomorrow. It was yesterday. Has the city changed some? Yes, we ain't stupid. We see it here. I'm not speaking for the city. I'm giving you my own opinion here. We see it, but just be, New York City, there is always has been, if you look for it, you're going to find it in the city. Good, bad, ugly, wonderful, magic. It's all here. So if you're going to look for it and you have an agenda of a story to tell, you're going to find it here in the city, but it is not the norm here. This city, I live about an hour north of the city. And when I first started coming back, I was seeing those stories too. I'm like, what am I going to encounter? It's still an amazing city. Manhattan is just incredible. The people are incredible. We are busting our butt to make sure that this city maintains its good reputation and that it's a wonderful, safe, magical place to live. So please turn, as I told my dad, turn off those news stories. That is a different agenda. The city is magical. It's huge. It's massive. If you want to find that bad story, it's there, but it's not the typical. I hope you guys all agree to that.
1000%. I am a born bred New Yorker, so I may be partial, but I've never felt more safe than I do in the city, and even during the pandemic. So touching on some of what was mentioned before, because we buckled down as a city during, one of the hardest times in history for our city. And yeah, again, as Dave said, you can find whatever you want to find in anything. So if you want to find something that fits your narrative, you will. But I can tell you that walking through the streets of, Manhattan and just all the boroughs, I'm a Queens girl, the magic is still there. I feel it in my bones, and it's only going to amplify moving forward.
And just to add that, not only are we dealing with this pandemic, but New York City is dealing with some other social issues as well, so is the country. And so during Black Lives Matter this summer, we had tackled it. NYC Company, and especially John, has done amazing work to be like, this is our city, these are our problems. We're gonna talk about this and face it head on. So just because we're not shy about addressing it, don't think that means that the city is falling downhill. No, we're just talking about it because that's what New Yorkers do. We see something, we're going to say something. So with that and the recent Asian American hate crimes in the city, we're saying it, we're talking about it, but please don't conflate that's now overtaken our city. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And Courtney, since you have already mentioned that you have groups that are already inquiring about New York, so we know we don't have a problem there. I'm going to give John the last word on how do we promote your city, my friend.
I think that the number one way is to follow the science, right? I think that the number one encouraging thing about New York City is that we are doing the right things, right? We're making sure that everything is safe before we move forward. I think the other thing to note is that New York City is on a big stage, possibly the biggest stage in the world. So like to the point that David and Taylor made, everything that happens in New York City gets amplified. We all know that it hasn't been a rosy year for any destination. Right. So what's happening in New York City isn't really different than what's happening in many places around the world. right? And when everybody returns and the madness is over, New York City is going to be as special as it ever was. You know, we're still going to have Broadway. We're still going to have the greatest views in the city. We're still going to have the greatest dining scene, right? We're still going to have all these things, and we're taking baby steps to get there. We already have, you know, New York Pops Up that's doing free performances all around the you know, New York City. We have Lincoln Center's or Restart Stages, right, which is going to start putting some of the performance opportunities back out. So even until we can get back to what normal looks like, the city's gonna be a really vibrant place in the next couple of months, and New Yorkers are no shortage of the reason why it's going to be that way. So New York is here to stay. New York is to me the most special place on earth. And like we've taken to saying at NYC Company, the recovery is going to be gradual, but it's certain.
Absolutely. And I think well said from all of our panelists, and John, well said for all of the cities around the world, especially, you know, Casey just popped in there. You know, we love New York and love from Minneapolis. And I think, as you mentioned, all cities are going through this. All cities are reopening, and they will still all have all of the special things that make them who they are. And visitors will come back, because I think Dave said it first, an hour and 5 minutes ago, because I kept you longer than I was supposed to, that this is a resilient industry, and we will be back, and it will come back strong. So with that, thank you for staying late with me. Thank you for being on this panel. This was a great conversation. I could have kept going for another hour, and you would have looked at me like I'm crazy, like it's time to end now. But I think everyone on the call would have stayed on as well, because it was an amazing conversation to have and gave everyone lots to think about. Thank you so much, panelists. Thank you so much, attendees, for continuing to come back week after week. We will be back next week with another very cool conversation. And until then, have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.